Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel Stewart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial we're going to learn how to paint a very easy realistic seascapes. I'm going to teach you how to blend colours and give you lots of painting recipes, how to easily paint nice realistic clouds. I'm going to teach you obviously how to paint a wave, how to paint foam and use colour to create depths and distance so you can paint this really lovely easy seascape acrylic painting. So let's get into it. So a nice and easy beginner's tutorial today, so we're just going to use a few colours. They are titanium white, sap green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, iris purple and raw umber brown. Burnt sienna stained canvas that I've used chalk and I've used cobalt blue to create an outline. We've got the horizon directly halfway down the canvas. We're going to have half the canvas as sky and the other half as the wave and the beach. So we're going to have some nice clouds and we're going to have this straight horizon. We're going to have this big wave coming towards the beach just to create a bit of focus for the viewer. We're going to have some sea foam and some shallow water, and then we're going to have some shiny wet sand, and then we're going to have some dark sand. So if you'd like to pause the video and copy down the outline, feel free to do so. So we're going to just block in from the back, so we're going to always paint really far back, so we're going to paint the sky first. Now to paint a nice light sky, we're going to mix lots and lots of titanium white, a little dollop of cobalt blue, which is the darker shade, and a little bit of cerulean blue, but we want predominantly pastel colours, so we want to use plenty of titanium white. So all we're going to do, we're just going to create a really light shade of pastel blue at the horizon, just on our nice straight line here. And the reason we do that is because the horizon is always a bit lighter than the top of the sky. It's always very light in colour. So by adding plenty of white, a little bit of cerulean blue, which is the turquoise one, and a little bit of cobalt blue, which is the cooler blue, we can make this lovely sort of pastel blue. So all we're going to do is just block in to this cloud, and we're just going to create a far away wispy horizon. So a lot of painting seascapes is just knowing your colours, so hopefully you can get lots of paint recipes from today's tutorial and then you can apply them to your own work. So as we move up in the sky, we're going to get slightly darker, so we're going to just add a little bit more of the blues, so a bit of cobalt blue and a bit of cerulean blue and a tiny bit of purple, just a tad, and plenty of white still, and we're just going to make a nice cooler shade of blue. So by adding purple and a little bit more of the blues, it's just getting slightly darker, and then all we're going to do is just make a darker shade of pastel blue and gently blend it into the lighter shade, just so our transitions you don't notice. So we're just trying to create a nice sort of transition from the light colour of blue at the horizon and the darker colours of blue to frame the painting at the top of the canvas. So we're just going to block in this area. Now I've used cobalt blue just as a dark shadow colour, just so I know where everything is. The good thing about cobalt blue is because it's so dark, it shines through. So when we're applying these pastel colours, you can still see it underneath. It still shines through. So just by using a dark colour for your outline, what it does is it just gives you a sort of guide. So when you're blocking things in, it makes it so much easier for you. It's a little painting trick. So if you block in using a dark colour, such as the cobalt blue, it just really helps if you're doing anything pastel. So we're going to get even darker as we move to the top of the painting. So we're going to add more of the two blues. So we've got plenty of cobalt blue, plenty of cerulean blue, a bit of purple to make it nice and cool, and still some whites, but less white now. So we're getting darker and darker as we move up. But we still want to keep it pastel, so we've still got plenty of white in there, just not as much as the last time, okay? So we've got this nice cool purpley blue now. And what we're going to do once I stop mixing, is we're going to block in the top of the painting and frame it. So by using a darker colour in the top corners and on the top edge, what it does is it just frames nicely the composition, and also it just looks really, really natural, because the sky is always lighter at the horizon and it's always darker as you move towards the top. I'm just adding a little bit of cerulean blue to it. I'm just trying to make it a little bit more turquoise. I think it's a bit too purpley. So that's the great thing about acrylics. You can always just mix them, test it out. If it's not what you want, they're so easy and so forgiving. You can just go over the top of them in a darker or lighter shade. So there we go, that looks a bit more realistic. And acrylics always dry a little bit darker, so add plenty of white, because even though it looks very pastel now, sometimes once it's dry it can dry a lot darker, so always add plenty of white, please. So we're just going to frame the corners. Don't worry if it's streaky, we're just blocking everything in. And don't worry if you go over your cobalt blue either. As I say, we'll paint all the clouds back in a minute. We just want to frame the painting and get nice dark edges going around it. So there we go, really nice and easy. Super easy technique. So lighter at the horizon and darker in the top corners, and you should have a nice blended sky. So if your version is like mine and you have lots of brush marks and some of the burnt sienna shining through, or bits of the under canvas, what you can do is just dry it with a hairdryer and just reapply the exact same colours and tones. So it's lighter shade of blue at the horizon, a dark shade in the middle, and an even darker shade at the top. So all I'm doing here, I'm just fast forwarding the footage because it's not really interesting. We're just doing the exact same technique. But all that does is it just takes out all the streaks and horrible brush marks of your work. So sometimes it's just worth, especially with background skies, just going over it twice just to get all the transitions really, really nice. And you can just blend it. And exact same colours, but it just gets rid of all those horrible brush marks on your canvas. So when you are happy with your background sky, what we're going to do, we're going to take the top colour that we mixed, so that was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, a little bit of purple to make it nice and cool, and some white. So we're going to take that colour that we've just mixed for the top of our sky, and we're going to use that darker shade to block in our ocean water. So what we're doing, don't worry if you go right up to the horizon, we'll use some painting tape later to make sure we've got a nice straight horizon. All I want you to do is just block in the canvas so we can get all rid of this horrible burnt sienna. Now the reason I always paint my canvas burnt sienna is for this exact reason, because I'm using a dark colour and we're using very pastel colours such as these blues. It allows me really clearly to see where I've missed areas, and also if the paint is so thin, because these colours are very pastel, it allows me to see, just like the background sky, where I need to give the paint a second coat of paint to make it thicker and cover up that horrible background. But you don't have to paint your canvas burnt sienna. It's just an old trick that artists use, so don't feel like you have to. So all we're doing, we're just using this darker, nice purpley blue just to block in our ocean water. And because our horizon is very nice and pastel and got plenty of that cerulean blue at the background, what it's doing now, we've got this lovely difference between the sky and the ocean. So really, really easy. Just block it in. And the great thing about that big wave with our nice shadows, we can see exactly where that is. We'll keep that how it is, and we'll do the detail later once we've blocked it all in. So just like your background sky, if your ocean is a bit haggard and it has lots of brush marks, or some of the burnt sienna shining through because your paint wasn't thick enough, just dry up your work with a hairdryer. Just mix the exact same colour and just give it a second coat of paint. Acrylics, because they're water based, if you give them a second coat of paint, it makes them much thicker, and it also makes them more vibrant, so it just makes them look prettier. So now that we're coming into the shore, we're going to have a mixture between the blue water of the ocean and the brown sort of sand colour. So I've got this raw umber colour, and below it I've got a pre-mixed colour which I'm going to show you how to make a really cool colour for sand, which is basically raw umber. Now raw umber is a bit more earthy than burnt umber, and a little bit of titanium white and a little bit of cobalt blue, and you can make this sort of really realistic sand colour. So raw umber brown, not burnt umber, raw umber, and a little bit of cobalt blue and plenty of titanium white, and you can create this nice sort of pastel earthy sand colour. So this is all the dark sand, this is not the wet sand, this is all the sort of dry sand that you would walk along the beach. And in the area that we're leaving burnt sienna, we're going to mix the ocean colour of the blues and this brown together, and we're going to create a nice transition that will trick your eyes hopefully. So all I want you to do is just mix some raw umber, some white and a little bit of cobalt blue, and just block in the bottom of your painting for the sand. So I'm going to just leave a little curve here just so it looks like the sand is sort of following the path of the waves. So there we go, all blocked in, super easy. And then what we're going to do, we're going to mix our ocean colour. So we're just going to add more blue to the mix. So plenty of white, some cobalt blue and some raw umber. And then we're going to start adding some cerulean blue, which is the more turquoise of the blue. Still plenty of brown because we want to have it that it's mixing in with the sand. But the great thing about cerulean blue, it's more turquoise, it's more greenish. If you mix the two together, still got plenty of white, it looks like very shallow water. You see? So there's a little trick, a little painting recipe that you can note down and you can use for all your seascapes. So just raw umber, a little bit of cobalt blue, plenty of white, and then add as much cerulean blue to get this sort of nice sort of greeny grey, I would say. And this looks like where the sand and the ocean meet, and you get that really lovely sort of transparent sort of sea water that's really shallow, and you get the sort of wet sand that sort of shimmers where the water has sort of pulled back and left the shimmering wet sand. So I'm just going to load up my brush, just block in all down here. Nice and easy. Okay, so now we're going to combine the two. So we're going to get the previous colour that we mixed before, which was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, lots of white and a dab of purple, and we're going to mix it into our sand colour. Okay, so we've got our nice sky colour. We're going to add some raw umber, and we're just going to have it a tad more blue than we have brown, and we're just going to gently glide the paintbrush into the darker shade of brown. And we're just going to try to make the transitions look a bit more seamless, just so it looks like the water is mixing into the sand. So we're just coming down. And then we're just going to get some of the darker blue. So I'm just remaking it. Mine's dried a bit, so I'm just remaking it. There we go. And we just add in a bit more blue to the mix, so less brown, more blue. And just where the two colours meet, look, we're just going over the top in the middle, and we're just joining them up, so the transition's really, really smooth. It's almost like you don't notice the colour change from the blue ocean to the wet sand and the shallow water. It's a super easy technique. Just load up your brush, have hardly any water on your brush, and just sort of look, colour it in, just sort of glaze over the top. And just blend the colours together. Easy peasy. So once it's dry, we've got this lovely transition in our sky, and we've got this lovely deep ocean in the far distance, and this shallow water as it comes towards the beach, and we've got this big divide with the nice dark sand. So we've got these really realistic colours, and we've got this big wave coming towards us. So what we're going to do, while all our sand and everything is dry, and we're gonna paint some clouds. So we're gonna get some raw umber and cobalt blue and plenty of white, and we're gonna make a sort of nice sort of browny grey. We're gonna add a dab of purple just to make it more cooler. So cobalt blue and purple, really good for making things seem cooler and in the shade. And just by adding a tiny bit of the raw umber, it just makes your grey look more natural and more earthy. So it's a little cheat. Raw umber is really good for things like the shadows of clouds. So all we're going to do, we're just going to block in a shape of a big cloud in this nice dark grey. So don't worry about any shapes or anything just yet. We just want to block it in with the shadow colour first. So what we tend to do is we use the darkest colours first. So this is going to be all the bits of the clouds that's not getting as much sunlight. And then we put the highlights over the top. So I'm just adding a little bit more blue to the mix because I think it's still a bit brown. So I'm just adding a tinge more cobalt blue to the mix. So just get plenty of paint on your brush and just try to block in a cloud shape. But don't worry about any detail or anything, we just want to create a big block. So all this area could be a low forming cloud. So there's the subscribe button and the bell notification. If you'd like to know when every new tutorial is uploaded straight away, if you turn on the bell notification on here on YouTube, it will alert you when a new tutorial. I'm trying to do at least one tutorial a week for everyone. If anyone would like anything they want to learn, please put ideas in the comments below and I will see if I can make them into a tutorial. And thank you so much for everyone who's liking and subscribing. The channel is doing really well. It's growing very fast now, and lots of artists are finding it very useful, because the more you like and subscribe and the more views we get, the more YouTube shows the tutorials to other artists and more artists get to learn. So thank you so much for helping other artists and supporting the channel, everyone who's liked and subscribed. So we've got our nice blocked in cloud, and all I'm going to do, now we've got that big shape of our main one, I'm just going to use this dark shadow colour just to have some breakaway ones. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to think of where they can be, and I'm just going to create some shapes of some little clouds that are sort of breaking away from this big one. I'm just using this shadow colour to emphasise that. So clouds tend to go quite diagonal as they go up into a sky, but when they're on the horizon they tend to be quite flat and boring. So these ones that are up quite high we're going to make quite diagonal, but the ones down here at the horizon just go sort of straight across. They're always just pretty flat Think of a flat pancake. So we're just going to make them a little bit bobbly just so they look more realistic. So what we're going to do, we're going to mix the horizon colours. So do you remember it was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, a little bit of white and some purple. And what we're going to do, we're just going to make a sort of this middle part of our sky colour. And while the raw umber is drying, we're just going to mix this lighter pastel blue into it. So just like we did with the ocean, what we're doing, we're putting the dark shadow colour on first, and then we're blending this lighter blue over the top. So all I'm doing, I'm going right up to the edges of the clouds, and I'm using this light blue, and I've got plenty of paint on my brush. And we're just blocking in the top half of the cloud, and then I'm going to wipe away all the paint off my brush. I've got nearly no paint on my brush, and all I'm going to do is gently blend the colours together just so the transition is nice and smooth. So just by taking all the paint off your brush and having a dry brush, my brush is a little bit moist, it's got a tiny bit of water, but it's not full of water that you'll drown in it. And all I'm going to do is look, just create nice bright edges using this nice pastel blue. So plenty of thick paint at the top and on the edges. So if we have the sun, say, let's say the sun say coming from the right, and then we're going to wipe off most of the paint, and just with the chalky residue we're just going to gently blend it into that shadow colour and create texture in our clouds, you see. So it's a super easy technique, and all it does is it makes it look like one of the bottom area of the clouds aren't getting as much sunlight and the top area is getting all the sunlight, and it just makes it look more three-dimensional. And look, you can load up your brush and add sort of bumps in the clouds, because clouds have got all these bubbles and froths. They're like marshmallows, aren't they? So what you can do, look, you can just create texture if you want to, and shapes in your clouds. Totally up to you. And you can do, look, the same technique. You can wipe away all the paint and just make them look nice and frothy so they're not so harsh. So a lot of blending is really easy if you have a nice soft dry brush, so the bristles are really soft to touch and you have hardly any paint. You can just blend really easily. So now we've got this nice pastel blue mixing into our raw umber. We've got this nice shadowy colour on our clouds, so we've got this nice sort of blended between the really darks and the sort of medium darks. So once we've done this big cloud, we've put in lots of sort of nice detail in it, we're going to do some of the little clouds. So again, we're just trying to think, if the light is coming from the right hand side, it's sort of be hitting the tops of the clouds. So we're just using this nice pastel blue just over the top and just around some of the edges, just to create some highlights. So we've got this nice soft cloud, but it's a bit boring, and some of these little ones, they're not popping. So what we're going to do now we've got the shadows on our clouds, is we're just going to take pure titanium white and we're going to do the edge trick where we go right down on the sharp edges and we're going to create highlights. So what you can do while it's still wet, we can, just like we did with the blue and the brown, we can blend it, and then once it's dry we can go over the top and make everything look really bright. But first we're just going to go around the edges and we're just going to make a nice sharp white edge to make it look like the sunlight is sort of caressing these edges, and again just to make it more three-dimensional. So look, I've got plenty of paint on my brush and just going around the edges. It's almost like outlining the cloud. And then we can do the same trick that we did before. Look, we can wipe away all the paint near enough and then we can just sort of blend it downwards and just make the transitions nice and soft. And the great thing about, as I say, with acrylics, because they are water based, even when you put white over the top, it will literally bleed into all that light blue. So look, even though we've put quite a bright white to create an outline, it will dry more of a light blue because it will pick up the blue from underneath. So all we're going to do, we're just creating some texture again, just leaving some gaps in the underpainting just to make it look all frothy. So all this will just look nice and pastel. And we'll do the same with the little clouds. So we'll think if the light is coming from the right, we'll just make the right edges all nice and bright. So just add some highlights just on these little clouds here on the right. And then we'll do some here now that it's starting to dry. So remember, if you go over it a second time when it's dry, the white will be much more vibrant, much more brighter. So while this is drying, we'll put some highlights down here. And match it over here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to dry our canvas with a hairdryer. So we've got this nice blocked in cloud, we've got a dark shade at the bottom, we've got the blue in the middle and the white on the edges. And now that it's dry, we're just going to get pure titanium white. And all we're going to do is just on the right edges of it, we're just going to put lots and lots of paint on now and just make it extremely bright and vibrant using that white. So as I say, with acrylics, they pick up the underpainting colour. So just by drying your work and giving it a second layer of paint, you can see how vibrant this white is now. So if you ever want to add highlights to one edge of your cloud, this is a little trick. Just dry your canvas and just go over the top with a second coat of thick paint, and you can get this nice bright highlighted edge. So look, all I'm doing, I'm just going up the right hand side of the cloud, just imagining that the light's coming from that side, and that's why it's already highlighted. And then because we've got the darker sort of burnt umber, sort of raw umber, excuse me, bottom and the blue in the middle, it kind of leaves a nice transition and just makes it look like some areas are in the shade. And as again, you can add texture if you want to. So if you want to add some texture, you can use the white just to do that. Just leave gaps again in the underpainting to shine through. And if you want to add highlights to your other clouds, look, so now it's dry, look, just by putting really thick paint, I've got no water, I've just got a big blob of paint. I'm now putting on really harsh highlights just to emphasize the sunlight on the clouds. So just load up your brush, get plenty of paint. Don't be stingy with your paint, and don't add water, because if you add water it will thin out your paint. So try to just get a dry brush, just dry your brush with some kitchen roll, and then just get just a pure paint, no water, and then you can have big blobs of it like I'm doing, and you can just really emphasize the highlights, just make it look more contrasting. So we're just going to make these ones look much brighter. And then what you can do is you can take some of the horizon colour, which was the really light pastel blue, which was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and lots of white. And you can poke holes in your clouds. So if you don't like the shape, or you just want to make them a bit more wispy and push them further back, you can take some of the sky colour and just poke holes in your clouds, and just make the edges a little bit softer. So a little trick, if you want to blend your clouds more into your background sky, just take some of the background sky colour, and what you can do is just poke holes, and you can just create some little wispy bits, just sort of breakaway areas. So it's another little easy trick. You can always change the shape of your clouds or backgrounds by just using the sky colour. A lot of the time we do this with trees. We we paint in the trees, and then we poke holes to create the gaps between the leaves. So all we're doing, we're just taking some of the sky colour and doing the exact same technique with the clouds. So if you want to change the shape or just make them softer, just use the sky colour. And again, if you rework areas and you're not happy with it, you can just do the big thick paint trick where you get lots of white paint, just dry canvas, and you can just highlight areas, or you can change the shape of anything. It's a great thing about painting clouds. It's really relaxing. There's no right or wrong way, but a lot of it is just building it up gradually. So you just lay the foundations with the dark colours, and then as it dries, as I say, if you want to highlight areas or darken areas, you can do, just to make it look more 3D. So I don't want to make these too prominent because they're bringing them forward, so I'm just smearing them to push them back. But I'm just going to put some highlights here, my thick white paint, so just here in the middle, so just above the wave. I want the wave to be a central focus, so just by putting some highlights in the middle, I just want people to look down the middle of the painting, you see. So if I make them nice and bright here in the middle, people will look this way, give them something to focus on. So as I say, you can change shapes, it's so easy. Just doing this painting at my imagination today. So if you struggle, you can use reference photos, but I do this so often now, I can just make up clouds and waves and things. So just take your time, relax. And then when you're happy with your clouds and everything is perfect in your sky, if you want to, you can use some painting tape and you can just measure a straight horizon with a tape measure. Please make sure your canvas is nice and dry before applying the tape, because you don't want to rip off any of your paint. So just dry it with a hairdryer. And if you just want to make your horizon nice and straight, so you want the skyline and the ocean nice and straight, just use some of the horizon colour, go right down to the tape so you get a nice sharp edge, and then you will get a nice straight horizon. So super easy technique, just by using painting tape you can just get a nice straight horizon and a nice straight ocean, and our seascape landscape is starting to take real full effect. Now the sky is always the hardest part. That's why it probably takes a bit, about halfway through the tutorial now, it probably is the hardest bit. I always say that to people. Skies and clouds are quite hard, but the beach and the waves, they're easy. So we're going to do that now. So we're going to get some of the raw umber and white. So raw umber and plenty of white. We're going to add some cobalt blue to it, and we're going to add a tad of sap green, just a little tiny bit of sap green. So raw umber and white, cobalt blue, and a little bit of sap green, just to make it a little bit more sea-weary. And we're going to add a tiny bit of purple just to cool it down. And we're just going to make this dark ocean wave colour. So we've blocked in our ocean with a lovely blue underpainting. And what we're going to do, we're going to swap to a flat-headed brush. Now a flat-headed brush is really, really good for creating sharp lines. And we're going to create waves. So these are all the caps of the waves that are showing as they come towards the ocean. So all we're doing is, if we go right up to the horizon, we're just making, almost trying to make sort of squiggly lines that are pretty flat. So look, by using the flat edge of the brush, it's quite easy to get straight lines. And all we're doing, we're just creating the caps of waves coming towards the beach. So we'd have a big wave behind this wave. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more cobalt blue to the mix, just to make it a bit darker. So I'm just going to add a little bit more blue, just to make it a little bit darker. And all I'm going to do, look, I'm just using the sharp edge of the brush. I'm just creating little lines going across the canvas. And it should create a 3D effect, where it looks like waves fading out into the distance. And if you get hardly any paint, you can just make them look further back. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit more blue. I'm just going to make it a darker shade. And the reason we're making a darker shade is we're getting closer to the viewer. So we're using darker blues now to emphasize these waves and bring them closer towards the viewer. So the first thing we're going to do, we're just going to create a nice sharp edge, and this is where the water and the wet sand sort of meet. So we're just creating a nice sharp edge here with the fine sort of edge of my flat brush. And then I'm just going to load up plenty of paint on my brush, and we're going to start creating the detail and the sort of texture in the water. So all I'm doing, I'm just shading underneath the wave. So imagine a shadow as a wave sort of comes towards the beach, and then all I'm doing is just creating little zigzags with my flat brush. So I'm having some come underneath the wave and then some a bit more straight, and these again are just the sort of shadows in the water, the divots, just to give it a three-dimensional look. So it's really, really easy. Just load up your brush with paint, sort of come down diagonally just under the wave, just to emphasize it coming towards the beach, and then just go across and just create the detail. So now we've got that underpainting, and now we've got the darker the shadows coming over. What it should be doing is tricking your eyes to make it look 3D. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to shade this bigger wave behind in that darker colour, just bring it a little bit closer towards the viewer. So can you see, by using darker colours, it brings it closer towards you. So you don't want to make it too dark and bring it real close. We still want to push it back into the distance. So that's starting to look very 3D already. And then we're going to swap to a fine liner. And what we're going to do, we're just going to use that same dark sort of purpley brown colour, and we're just going to put some divots in the sand. So again, just like we've put divots in the water, we're just going to put some texture in our sand, just so it looks like it's been walked through, and we just have some shadows. And by again just using this colour, we can darken up our corners again to make the viewer focus down the middle. So all I'm doing, I'm going to sign it in that left hand corner, so I want it nice and dark, so I want to put my signature there. And again, we're just creating texture in the sand, just so it doesn't look as boring and it just looks more realistic. So we're not going to go like photorealistic or anything, it's just more to trick the eye and just create easy realism just using colours. So perfect for beginners and intermediate painters. And then we're going to get some cobalt blue and some raw umber, and we're going to mix the two together. So cobalt blue and raw umber. So we create a really nice dark shadow colour now. And we're going to add a little bit of sap green just to make it more oceany. And a little bit of purple just to make it more cooler. And we're going to create a really sort of dark wave colour now. So this is the shadow colour for our big wave. So if you imagine a big wave is coming up towards the beach. So we're blocking that in. So first we're going to put the shadow colour. And this is all the water as it sort of rises up and crashes towards the beach. So by using a really dark blue, what we're doing is we're bringing it real forward and closer towards the viewer. And again, we're just using the flat brush because it's really easy to do straight lines. Don't worry if it's slightly wonky, waves are slightly wonky because water's smooth. And we're going to use the same colour look just to emphasize the shadow underneath it, and you can even shade it if you want to. So again, look, you can just emphasize the shadows. You can have some dark caps of waves here in the foreground because this area, as the water's crashing, we'll be getting lots of shadows. So don't be shy with the paint. So we're just going to shade all underneath here, create a dark harsh shadow. But it's the same trick. Look, we're just using the flat edge of the brush. Here we go. And then if I zoom in for you, so it's nice and easy, we're going to take the dark colour that we use for the ocean and the top of the sky, which was cobalt blue, cerulean blue, purple and a little bit of white. So we're creating a nice dark shadow tone now. So we want to add things like purple to the mix because we want to make it nice and cool. So just like our dark, harsh ocean wave colour, we want to create a nice shadow colour. So we're mixing this nice purpley blue, and we're going to add just a tiny dot of raw umber. And all we're going to do, we're just going to shade in this area of the wave. So this is all the froth, but if you imagine, it's the same colour as the sky almost, because it's getting all the light from the sky. So we don't want to do it pure white. We want to create this nice shadowy blue. So just like we did with the clouds, we're going to put the shadows on first, and then it's so much easier to put the highlights over the top and create the detail and the realism. So all we're doing, look, we're just shading in this area between our dark edges. So just load up your brush, use plenty of paint. I'm not using any water, I'm just splatting on the paint. And we're just going to colour in the shadows first. So this is super easy. And then once you're happy with it, we're going to take the horizon colour, which was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and lots of white. So we're going to make that pastel blue that we made before for the horizon colour. And we're going to add some highlights. So all I'm doing, look, just like the clouds, I'm just leaving gaps in the underpainting to let that darker blue shine through. And I'm just creating splats, and I'm creating texture. So I'm just leaving these gaps just so it looks like highlights and it looks like sea foam. So it looks like our wave is crashing into the beach. And again, what will happen is that lighter blue will pick up some of the darker blue, and it will dry quite flat. So if you have to do it twice, you have to do it twice. But what we're trying to do is just try to create texture. So again, just leave plenty of gaps, especially at the bottom of the sea froth, and that will act as shadow. So if you go up the top with the highlight, so just like we did with the cloud's edge, and you just leave a little bit of that darker blue at the bottom, what it will do is it will look like the water is sort of cascading downwards and have the shadow blend into the previous darker wave colour. So just again, don't have any water on your brush, just use plenty of thick paint, just leave a little gaps in the underpainting to shine through, and just create the illusion of texture. We want to go all the way to the end. And then again, look, get the flat brush, and what we're going to do, we're just going to take some of that dark shadow colour. I'm just going to dip my brush in a bit of water because my paint has dried. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to make this edge here a little bit harsher to again just bring it forward and closer to the viewer. So by using harsher colours in the foreground, it will bring it closer. And by using more pastel colours, it will push the background back. So easy to remember, just only use harsh colours in the foreground and that will bring things towards the viewer. Don't use them in the background or it'll bring it too close. And I'm just going to darken up my corners with a bit of texture, just with that harsher browny blue. Just again, just putting some dots in the sand, just so it looks like someone's walked through it. Okay, so that looks fantastic. And then all we're going to do, now this is dry, we're just going to go take a little bit of the horizon colour we just previously used for our sea foam. So cerulean blue, white and cobalt blue. And we're just going to create a little edge. We're still going to leave that nice dark shadowy ridge. We're just going to go alongside it with a fine liner. And we're just going to create sort of the sea froth as it comes up onto the beach. You get that sort of nice bubbly edge in the water. So all we're going to do, look, we're just going to create a nice sort of bubbly edge. And we're just going to sort of outline our outline, if that makes sense. We're just going to leave that nice dark outline and we're just going to go alongside. The reason we want that nice dark outline is to create a 3D shadow effect. So there we go, look how easy that is. We're just going to create a nice frothy edge of water. And then all we're going to do is create zigzags. So look, all I'm doing is just creating little zigzags with this fine liner, and I'm joining some of them up to the outside edge. So some of them are going up into the wave, and then some of them, look, are coming down and just joining it into that sort of thick edge that we just painted in. And this is all the sort of wash and sort of parts of the waves. Look, you can even do little dots to create bubbles. So look, all we're doing, look, we're just creating little zigzags and dots and just joining some of them up to that outer edge. And it's just to give our water some more texture and more realism. So load up your brush, just create some dots and zigzags and just join some of them up. So again, like always, just take your time, use a really fine liner brush and it makes your job so much easier. So just by having a really sharp nibbed brush, you can just do really sharp dots, look, and just really sharp zigzags, and you can do it once you get quick, look, you can just do it so easily, and it does all the work for you, the brush. So now we've got our sea foam. What we can do again, look, we can just go over the highlights with thicker paint now that she's dry, really emphasize them. So that's why I keep saying to you, with acrylics, sometimes you just have to do second coats and maybe sometimes a third coat, because they're not like oils where they're really, really thick and really, really bright. Because they're water based, they just dry a bit flat. So if you want that wow factor with acrylics, just take your time and just dry your work and just go over areas just to really emphasize parts of it. So there we go, we've got some nice down. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to create a shiny ridge on our wet sand. So we're using the exact same colour, we're just using this lovely pastel blue. And all we're going to do, we're just going to go around this area, just make it a bit rounded, just to make it look like the water's sort of peeled back onto this wet sand. And you get that sort of shimmer, where it's the sky colour. So all I'm doing, I'm just using a dry, completely dry brush, and I'm just smearing it. You can use your finger too if you don't want to use a brush. But all I'm doing, look, I'm just softening it up, just like we did with the clouds. So I'm just softening it up. So a lot of the time it's just experimenting, just seeing, look, if an edge is too sharp, like here, because I put lots and lots of paint on it. So there we go, look, we've got this nice sharp edge. Is that a bit too sharp? Probably. So what you do, look, you just swap to a dry brush, and you can just either use your finger or use near it and just make it look less harsh. So acrylics are really forgiving, they're really cheap, they're so perfect for beginners because they're so easy to use. And I'm going to create some shimmer in the wet sand. So all I'm doing, I'm just using quite a lot of thick paint, but still using the same technique. I'm just blobbing it on, and then I'm just smearing it, just softening it up. I'm just trying to create sort of a reflection of some and some of the clouds, so where you get that lovely shimmer of sunlight, just to create the illusion of sort of wet sand. So look, load up your brush, just create quite a harsh edge, and then just smear it and just soften it up, just so it looks nice and shimmering. So let's make this edge nice and shimmering. There we go. I think I need to make it a little bit brighter. So again, just like the clouds, I'm just going over the edge just to make it sharper and brighter. And then I think the left hand side is a bit barren, so I'm just going to emphasize it more on this side. So I'm just going to get plenty of paint. I'm just going to put some zigzags in it with the flat brush. Again, I'm just trying to create the illusion of shimmer. So just splatting it on. And then just smearing it with my finger just to make it less harsh. And then I'm going to swap back to the fine liner, and I'm just going to put some bubbles and some little edges just where that water sort of peels back. You get a little bit of foam and bubbles. So by just using the fine liner, just like we did with the wave, that. So again, the brush does all the work. Look, if it's thin, I can get nice, really thin detail. So as I say, this is all out my imagination, but if you wanted to do it photorealistic, you can get a photo. There's lots of artists here on YouTube that do that, and you can just copy every bubble and everything. But it's just knowing the techniques and the colours and the paint. See, we're painting this lovely tutorial in less than 1 hour, but if you wanted to, there's no difference between doing something really super detailed and doing something easy peasy like today. It's just having the determination and the commitment to stay with it. But if you know your tools and you know the paint recipes and your colours, you can do it. So there we go, we're creating some nice bubbles and froth. Just little added detail. So let's have some over here because the right side's a bit barren. Just have some on the edge. And then now she's dry, I'm just going to get some white and some raw umber, and I'm just going to make a slightly lighter shade, so a bit more white. And again, I'm just putting some texture in the sand. So these are all the areas that are getting a little bit of sunlight off the clouds. So these little bit of highlighted sand, just a tad. Again, you don't have to do this, it's just to add more texture. And I'm just going to make this edge a little bit sharper using some of that brown. So just by using the sand colour, look, you can just change the shape of your wet sand. So just like the clouds, by just using a different colour, you can just emphasise areas or sharpen it up. And then just to finish her off, now I've smeared it with my finger, I'm just going to get some titanium white, and I'm just going to go over some of the areas of the sea froth in our wave. And I'm just going to make some highlights just on the tips, just to have a little bit of sharp sunlight just hitting that water, and again just emphasize it. So not too much. If you really wanted to, you can put lots and lots on, but I think if you do, it'll make it a little bit more cartoony. So just adding a little bit of white just on the tips. It just creates a little shimmer in the water. And it just sort of looks like the sunlight is hitting the water as the wave cascades to the beach. So nice and easy. And again, look, you can add some clouds if you want to. If you want to go a bit more photorealistic, you can have some little floater ones, some breaking off. Just emphasize your highlights. It's totally up to you. And when you think it's finished, it's finished. So I think she's finished, so I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learned how to do a nice gradient in your lovely blue sky with the lighter horizon. You've learned how to paint clouds really realistically, how to block in your ocean, how to block in wet sand and dark sand, how to use darker colours in a wave to bring it forward towards the viewer, and then how to add the texture and the highlights over the top to make it look 3D. So a really nice and easy painting tutorial of this gorgeous seascape beach. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Murray. We have plenty of landscape acrylic painting tutorials here on my channel, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to tag me on Instagram at mstewartpaintings to share your work too. See you soon guys, happy painting, take care, bye.